Just to let you know that this is National Drug, Fat, and Alcohol Week. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to have an open discussion with our parents to talk about the trends. I have 3 hosts this evening that are going to be working with me: Kathy Viola, Nancy Labov, and Raheem Jackson. So I'm going to let you know that they've been working with our school for, Kathy with the Center for Alcohol and Drug Resources for almost 20 years. And I'm so proud to be working with her, and along with Nancy, who is a registered nurse and who developed the alumni and recovery program, has brought speakers to our students. Both speakers tonight are part of our TNEC family, and they have brought speakers and psychoeducational workshops to our students throughout my tenure in TNEC High School, which has been now 20 years. So I'm very proud that they're on board, and I'm looking forward to an excellent evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Viola. She's going to start with policies and the new trends that we are facing. Thank you.
Okay, so here's my screen share. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so let me move us and go to presentation mode. Okay. Okay, so what's going on in the world of our youth? I just realized I had a typo in there, so my apologies. And we're going to talk about what our young people are facing today. So I just wanted to tell you that I come from Children's Aid and Family Services, which is a program, and the Center for Alcohol and Drug Resources. We have the Bergen County Prevention Coalition, which is county-wide, and Garfield, the Prevention Coalition. So that's where we're coming from. But I wanted to talk to you tonight about the big 3. The big 3 being nicotine and vaping type products, alcohol, and then cannabis. Because those are the 3 that the youth are seeing the most and experiencing the most. And the reason that we're concerned about it is we really want to think about brain development. Teenagers, we continue developing our brain until we're in our mid-20s. We go through 3 growth spurts in our life, the first one being birth to 4. Then there's one in the early teen years, the 10, 11, and 12-year-old age. And then the last growth spurt starts about 18 and goes to our mid-20s. And the reason we're concerned is the last part to develop of our brain is the frontal cortex, the one that allows executive decisions. If we do this, then what? And you can see that the more blue you have in your brain, the more developed the brain is. And that's what we want. Substance use can halt the development of our brain, and we don't want that to happen to our young people. And there's a great equation that kind of explains it, and it's 15-7-21. And the theory behind this is looking at research over many years. They've determined that if a young person starts to use substances before the age of 15, they are 7 times more likely to have a lifelong issue with substance misuse or addiction issues than the person that waits till 21. And that goes along with our brain development. So we want to protect our brain and delay the age of onset if we do. So we're going to talk first about nicotine and vaping devices and those kind of things. Hardly anyone smokes tobacco products, the traditional leaf tobacco products. In young people, that's down to only about 3%. But as that has dropped, we've become aware of the health effects of cigarettes and those things. The issues of vaping have gone up tremendously. So on this slide, you see some of in the lower right-hand corner, you see some of the jewels that also many of the disposables will have a look similar to that. In the center are the big tank models that you can fill yourself. And you can fill these with nicotine juices that have very high contents. You can also add nicotine salts to them, which eliminates a lot of the burning sensation. These are several of the kinds that you might see a young person having. Some of them have skins on them to decorate them. Some of them do not. This is an ever-changing world. For a long time, Jewel was the most popular and around all over the place. And then it got replaced by Puff Bar, and Views. Now these other brands, Smoke, Geek Vape, Boo Poo, are now the top sellers. So this is a constantly evolving situation. The one thing that we should know, going back to this, is that there are many places that are still selling flavored nicotine devices. In November of 2020, New Jersey banned the sale of flavors outside of Virginia, regular tobacco, Virginia tobacco, and mint or menthol. All other flavors are not supposed to be sold in any nicotine product, but there are many places that are still selling them. So we're working statewide on ensuring greater compliance to that. Some of it may be because the vendors don't know that this law was enacted. Some of it may be that they're just still selling anyway. So nicotine products often are the first time that people will use. They're readily accessible, they're easy to get, they're relatively inexpensive. And one of the reasons that they cause harm is that they are there. You can load them with different amounts of nicotine. You can also load them with THC oil, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the other thing is when you're smoking a traditional cigarette and there are 20 in a package, you will stop at the end of a cigarette. With a vaping device that can hold the equivalent of 22 cigarettes, you're not stopping, and you might do the whole thing at once. And young people are often reporting using one a day, using 3 or 4 a day on the weekends. So this is why this is concerned. We also talk about hookahs, and the picture on the right is what hookah nicotine looks like, and they are still selling it in a variety of flavors. This particular brand in this picture was in a vape shop, and it came in like 20 different flavors. Hookahs are culturally accessible and part of culture for family celebrations, religious events, and all in some cultures. Where our concern in the prevention field comes is that the use of hookahs is expanding well beyond cultural or religious or family events into college campuses with hookah bars or bars that are open just for hookahs. And the number of people using them and inhaling the nicotine from that is expanding. And that's where our concern in prevention comes in. Alcohol is the other one of the first three that's also easily accessible. We know that the legal age to purchase is 21, but it's readily available. So some of the things in this picture that make it enticing are you can get the shot glasses with the flavors. On the bottom right, you see beer pong. You can buy beer pong sets in any grocery store. You can also buy shot sets, the same kind of thing, where you try to shoot your ping pong ball into it. And if you do, you have to drink it. And then you have the thing in the center up top that more than one person can drink, and it doesn't have any stoppage on it. So you drink until it's empty. So you could put a whole fifth of something in there and drink away. The picture on the left is an advertisement that popped up to a colleague I have in her early 20s. And the reason that we show it to you is because it's called hard seltzer. But if you just looked at this, you might think it was seltzer water and not understand that it had an alcohol content in it. And a lot of times young people are confused by that and might get something with alcohol when that was not their intention. So if as a parent you haven't walked through a liquor store in quite a while, take a walk through and look at the alcohol contents that are out there, the varieties, and check out some of the flavors. And a lot of the flavors are designed to entice young people because it will take the burning sensation of swallowing pure alcohol away and make it a little bit more palatable. So why do students start consuming alcohol? 89% of them say it's part of their social activity, part of their circle. 6% say it's peer pressure, a lot due curiosity, some just for boredom, some actually like the taste of it or the impact of a family member. So we want you to know that protecting our young people is more than just taking away the keys or allowing a designated driver. We want to understand the reasons that they might be wanting to use alcohol: social anxiety, because it is a system suppressant, and help us find other ways for them to reach the means that they were expecting to get from alcohol. So let's move on to cannabis. Cannabis, well, and we're going to explain these terms again in a minute, but cannabis or marijuana is around, and we have legalization. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So just a couple things on this picture. In the lower left-hand corner is a grinder. It looks a little bit like Martha Stewart's spice container, but it actually has ridges in the center so that you can take a cannabis bud that might be the size of your fist and grind it down so that it will fit into the rolled paper there, or a blunt, or a pre-sold shape. Then the colorful thing in the center right is a pipe. They come in glass in fancy colors like that. They'll also come in the high intensity plastic like you might use in your kitchen. The lower one on the bottom is a vaping device that you can load yourself. You can now also buy those preloaded. And then in the top right is cannabis edibles. And in the center is a bong that you can also put THC oil in, or THC wax, to smoke it like you would smoke, similar to the pattern of a hookah. So these are some of the different ways, and you can inhale cannabis, you can chew cannabis in an edible. So there's different forms of it. There are even patches out. Most of the medicinal is going to be in the form of edibles. Most medicinal is not smoked. So things to consider, though, new on the market are some other things. Cannabis today is a much higher potency than it has been in the past. Back in the 70s, Colombian Gold was the top of the line, and its THC content was in the neighborhood of 8 to 12% of the plant. Today, through genetic modification and plant breeding, they can get the leaf plant up to about 50% THC. And if you filter it down, you can get it up to 90 to 95% of THC if you're making it in an oil or a wax or a dab. Other reasons that young people use is it's kind of accepted that cannabis is around, and it's just one of the normal things we use, I've heard young people say to me. And maybe there's a little bit less of accountability because it's accepted. Perception of harm dropped once New Jersey made cannabis legal medicinally, and it's followed suit in the other states that have legalized it. So with adult use coming, which is often called recreational, we'll talk about that, the perception of harm about cannabis is going to go down again. And when that happens, the age of onset of use usually drops, meaning children younger are starting earlier than they might have before. So we worry about it because it's adolescence, it's still a brain development time. And the teen years are tricky. Even if your world is going well, the teen years can be tricky. So some of the risk behaviors that might cause, or that a teenager might use for using marijuana or alcohol or other substances, may be some of the things that go along with the development of their age. But some of the signs you may see is they might have difficulty thinking and processing things. They're not getting the next step, even if you think they should. We know that as a system suppressant, it's going to impair your coordination. It's going to slow your reflexes. Longer term use can mean you have difficult time paying attention, which can affect your academics in school. It can affect your social life. The other thing we'll look for with young people a lot of times is their circle of friends changing? Are they moving away from friends that they might have had and start to cycle through new friends, and then cycle through new friends till they find the friends that match the social group that may be doing the same things they want to be doing. So just generally some signs of impairment if someone is using, and this is related to cannabis or marijuana: red eyes, constricted or dilated pupils. It can go either way. You may also have some nystagmus, which is like a very quick shaking of your eye. Much like alcohol, it may give you slurred speech, or slower movements, slower reaction times, poor coordination. You may also, with prolonged use and you stop, you may start sweating. You may have almost like my warm flashes. You may also make you sleepy or drowsy because it is suppressants. The other thing that's out on the market is synthetic cannabinoids. These are made only in a factory. There's nothing natural about them. They are not plant-based. They may be sprayed on a plant-based like material, but it's not marijuana, it's not cannabis. It's sold in little packages like the little silver one on the right, or sometimes what looks like a condom package. It may be labeled as bath salts, and these can have stronger effects than regular cannabis. And because they're not all really regulated, or they're made in labs, there's no product consistency, there's no testing on these. The FDA does still consider this a substance that's not recommended. Then we're going to talk about what's new in the market. And the DEA considers this a gray area. In 2008, the Farm Bill allowed people to grow the hemp plant. And the hemp plant is a cousin to the sativa plant that is the cannabis plant. And then they have done with genetic modification, moved it a little to the right and a little to the left, and made Delta 9, Delta 8, and Delta 10. 9 is the traditional cannabis that is regulated by the FDA and is a Schedule II on the drug schedule and is illegal always at a federal level. So some of the things that we see, I want you to pay attention to the flavors here, guava berry, and then these small packages are designed to look like that candy Pop Rocks. And this comes from the CBD plant, the hemp plant, which has less than 0.03% of THC in it. But what's happening is people are still getting the effects of the THC because they're more or less stacking these. So if you see this pineapple one, this 500 milligrams, if you add it all up, it's 500 milligrams of potential CBD, but it's only 10 pieces of candy in there. And it's very easy to eat a whole bag of 10 pieces of candy. The little pink one only has 6 pieces in it as watermelon flavored, and it's 250 milligrams. So they're Delta 8, they're Delta 9, there's these fancy fun flavors. And I have to tell you that being a little bit older, the one in the top right, the CBD double shot, you're supposed to mix that with 8 ounces of a juice. And when I was in the store purchasing it, he wasn't quite sure why we were buying these things. And he said to me, the store owner was being very helpful. And he said to me, someone your age should not take this because it's much too strong for you. And the little ones to the right of that package were from a health fair where they were selling homemade candles and homemade food and homemade soaps and homemade CBDs. So those were the homemade CBD edibles. So these are all out there. They're readily available. These are all sold in vape shops. They may be sold in your local bodega. They may be sold in the liquor store. So our concern is that you can still build up and get enough THC, even though they come from the hemp plant and have a low THC naturally. If you eat enough of them, you're still going to get the effects. One gentleman in the store says, yeah, I like to eat a whole pack, sometimes 2, so I still feel a buzz tomorrow morning. Now, that was his opinion. That's what he told me while I was shopping. It may or may not be accurate. So they're not FDA approved. The only CBD product that's FDA approved is called Epidiolex, and it's used to treat seizures associated with epilepsy. So any product, anywhere, lotions, anything that say they have CBD in it when they've been tested by consumer agencies, some have more, some have less, some have none. The same product line might have varying amounts. So it's an unregulated market. These come in fun flavors. They look like candy. So this is just some of them. They're genetically engineered. They do have a high milligram of THC, and it's very easy to get more than 1 dose. Local hospitals have been reporting an increase in people coming in with the symptoms of overuse of cannabis. And the symptoms are that you're tired, you may be nauseous, you may be vomiting, you may be lethargic, and they're finding it happening in the very young children and the older adult population, because it's hard to read the packaging. They may not know. And when they look like candy flavors, it's very easy to mistake them for something that's candy. We still are dealing with MDMA or Molly or ecstasy, which is still out in the market. It is still in New Jersey. It does look like sweet tart. Sometimes it looks like glitter pills. What it does is it affects your nervous system and raises your body temperature very much and can be very addictive very quickly. It was kind of eradicated in the late 80s, and it's made a comeback. It is in Jersey and it's rising. Its usage from the reports we get from the state of New Jersey is it's becoming more and more prevalent. We also want to talk about prescription medication. I know we said we were going to talk about the big three that the young people really use, which is nicotine products, alcohol, and cannabis, but we still need to know what's out there in their world. And prescription meds are out there. And a lot of times they will start from a sports injury or getting your wisdom teeth pulled and you get a prescription. The head of Hackensack Medical Center's orthopedic department said statistics show that 1 in 20 first-time users of an opioid has the potential to will become addicted to that substance. So 1 in 20. So if we think about sports injuries or those kind of things, for some people, since we all have slightly different family histories and slightly different biologies, we could be that 1 in 20. And what happens is opioids, the pills, the Oxycontin, the oxycodone, and those get to be very expensive. And then people will turn to heroin. And what we have in this country and in New Jersey is heroin is less expensive than buying Oxycontin pills or those kind of pills. And then we have fentanyl, which is 50 times stronger than heroin. Most of it comes in from Mexico and from China. It's manufactured in a home laboratory under mostly not good, cleanly conditions. But in the little vials on the bottom right, you see how much heroin it would take to create an overdose situation and a possible fatal overdose. In the little bottle on the right, you'll see just a few grains. That's all it takes of fentanyl to be a fatal overdose. And most of the heroin in the state of New Jersey, as they test it, almost 95% of the heroin has fentanyl in it. And then there's even pure fentanyl. And there's another one, carfentanil, that's stronger than fentanyl. And fentanyl is very cheap. So this is what, just increasing your awareness of what's out there in the world. There's also over-the-counter products that young people use. This tends to be the younger crowd that uses these, but they might mix NyQuil with a soda or a product. And they'll call it, it's got a grape name kind of a thing, and they'll fix it. That's why when you go to buy some of your sinus medications, you have to sign for it because they would pull the ephedrine out and use the ephedrine to get high. Then your bottom left is also things that you can use, common household products that can be used for huffing, where you're inhaling the propellant in there to get a high from it. And then you can overuse cough medicine, you can overuse other over-the-counter prescription, over-the-counter medications. So those are what our young people are facing. That's just what is out in their world, and they can see really quite easily. So I do want to talk briefly about our New Jersey legislation in cannabis. In November of 2020, we voted to approve it as a state. In February 22nd, it was signed into law. It took them that long to figure out what some of the main parameters were and to establish the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, which would be responsible for all the rules around it. This past August, municipalities had to opt in or opt out whether they were going to allow any form of cannabis business in their community. If you opted in, you were opted in for 5 years. If you were opted out, you can opt back in the next 5 years. In August 22nd, then the Cannabis Regulatory Commission was formed and issued its first regulations. In December of 2021, 10 cultivation sites were approved based on applications for medicinal cannabis that were initially submitted in 2019. And they were approved now to increase the production of the cultivation of cannabis to meet the medical community's need for cannabis. Then in January 2nd, they also approved applications could be submitted for cultivation, packaging, and testing. In March 15th, applications were open to be accepted for retail establishments. So in the cannabis regulation, a retail establishment can sell up to 1 ounce at a time. You have to be 21 or older to purchase. To enter it, you have to be between the ages of 18 and 21. And if you're in that age bracket, you have to have a parent or guardian with you. There are pages of the regulations on what signage can be, what the packaging can look like, the labeling, the rules around advertising. And New Jersey is good that they are not allowing any legally manufactured cannabis to have any recognizable flavors or trademarked characters or products. So legal cannabis could not look like a Disney character or a superhero or pop rocks or anything. And there is a tracking system to track it from cultivation through the steps until it is at the dispensary and goes to the consumer. Driving under the influence is still legal in New Jersey. It's still all illegal federally, and there are fines for possession of over 6 months. They're not going to allow you to grow your own. And from the smoke-free acts, you're not allowed to smoke anywhere. You're not allowed to smoke tobacco type products or anything else. So we should not be smoking our cannabis on the street. So I do want to talk briefly about some terminology. In the legislation, New Jersey established that cannabis is the term that we will use for legally produced and manufactured marijuana. So cannabis is the legal version. Marijuana is the term that they are still keeping for non-regulated, or in other words, on the illegal or illicit market. And other people, common terminology, it may be weed, pot, Mary Jane, MJ, or J are some of the terms you may see. So cannabis comes from a legal regulated place and marijuana does not. And we also want to talk about, they do call the law recreational, and it does say recreational on the Cannabis Regulatory Commission webpage, but we're trying to discourage the use of the term recreational because it can be associated with fun, and oftentimes terminology matters to young people, and this can be one of the things that makes it more accepted in the culture and can lead to greater acceptance or reduced harm risk. So we want to talk about it. If it's legalized cannabis, we want to call it adult use cannabis, and it's made for those in non-medical situations over the age of 21 that are using it for their own purposes. So cannabis that's medically prescribed, it comes from a doctor, it has a prescription. There are, I think it's up to 17 categories of conditions that qualify for medical cannabis, and that you need a prescription. So right now, the only ones dispensing cannabis products legally in New Jersey are the medicinal ones. As of the applications opening March 15th, they are anticipating that some retail outlets may open as soon as the end of April or the end of May, depending on how well together they are. So some may take a little longer if they have to do building modifications or anything. And in the cannabis regulation from the state of New Jersey, as we did it, they, as part of the social justice campaign, they took away any issues for young people using or caught with it under the age of 21. And they did this for both cannabis and for alcohol. So a police officer cannot stop a young person under the age of 21 that they think might be under the influence or might be using alcohol or cannabis. Where we worry about that in prevention is, for a lot of young people, this might have been the first interaction, and this might have been the first step towards prevention or education that what they were doing would be harmful. Initially, there was not any parental notification. Now there is a thing for parental notification, but it's not being acted upon until the county prosecutor's office comes up with a system and a way to track it. If you've gotten a first offense in one community, does another community know? So it's still all kind of up in the air, but young people are using this as a free ticket to do this with no consequences. Just to tell you, some of the communities that have opted in already are these communities that listed here. And I'm going to talk to you, and you can be a community that has it. There are license types for cultivation, a manufacturer, a wholesaler, a distributor, a retailer, or a delivery person. And then in the application process, there are certain priorities that they are giving to diversely owned businesses. This may be and social equity justice. So diversely owned may be a woman owned, it may be a veteran owned, it may be a person of color owned, but they have to be an active part of the ownership, not just on paper. Social equity covers people that may have had an adjudicated cannabis offense in their past, and they might be given a higher priority on their application. Impact zones were set around the state. The only impact zone we have for this is Garfield. And then micro businesses are any business that's going to sell, a retail business that's less than 750 square feet, less than 2,500 square feet and less than 10 employees. And the state has put no limit on the number of micro businesses that will be allowed. So there could be as many micro businesses as we have alcohol outlets or Starbucks. And just to let you know that in Colorado, there are more cannabis retail sales than there are Starbucks, McDonald's, and Burger King all combined. So what's new in 2022 is at the end of December, early January, they approved 10 cultivation sites in the state of New Jersey. They also approved 4 vertically integrated treatment facilities, and a vertically integrated treatment facility can be a cultivator, a manufacturer, a packaging, and a retail outlet, all in the same facility. Of the 10 cultivation sites that they approved, only one is field grown. The other will be hydroponically grown like in the picture, and they can have up to 30,000 square feet of grow space. And the cannabis crop can be repeated on a 4-month cycle, 4 to 8 month cycle from seed to harvest. They are currently accepting still applications for cultivator manufacturing testing, and then the retail applications opened March 15th. So what is TNEC's status? If I looked at paperwork released in August of 2021 with the opt-in, opt-out status, it seemed to appear that TNEC was going to allow retail outlets. I have not found that legislation, and the city clerk was not able to give me clarity due to not being in the office today. And I spoke with him again yesterday. There is ordinance 2920-2021, or also called 6734, which appears to have gone to a second vote, but I couldn't find that it was signed off, that will allow a cultivation site in your low industrial areas. So I don't have a definitive answer, but it looks like you definitely have a cultivation site and have a high potential for having at least one retail site. So the reason that we're concerned about this is we kind of watch what's happened in other states if they've legalized it. And just real quick, in Colorado, the age of onset of first-time use dropped and is still higher than the national average. In Michigan, young adults 18 to 25, which is really your brain development period, have the highest proportion of being the past month cannabis users. So that's not your high school group, that's your college age young adult group. And in California, individuals 12 and older continue to have a higher rate of past month cannabis use after legalization than they did before legalization. So what do we feel in Bergen County? We did a survey during last year's National Night Out last August, and we asked young people in various communities around the county, and 13% of them believe marijuana is more safe since we had the legalization passed. 65% believe more youth will use marijuana now that it will be legal, and 46% report that their peers currently use. These studies usually tend to be pretty accurate. The 46%, I'm not sure if I think that's low or I think that's high, because sometimes perception is not always reality. When we ask these, sometimes people may put forward that they're using it to fit in a certain peer group. So that's kind of what's happening around here. Well, the other campaign that we have in conjunction with Englewood Hospital is, if you are going to have cannabis in your house, please store it safely. The same thing we talk about alcohol, put your alcohol away and don't have it accessible to those under 21. We ask you to store your medications that may be harmful in a locked situation. We're asking you to do the same thing with cannabis edibles if you have them in your home, because they're very easy to mistake for something else and to overindulge in. So that's kind of what's going on in the world in a very quick nutshell. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we can answer them at the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your time. This is our contact information, but you can reach us through Adrian, and I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to the next group. Let's stop share.
Okay, that would be me. I believe so. Hello, I am Nancy LeBeau. I founded the organization Alumni in Recovery. And I want to thank Kathy so much for such an amazingly thorough presentation. Thanks, Kathy. That was great listening to you. I got to tell you all, as a woman, I've been sober and clean for 34 years. I have been a nurse. I've worked in the field of addiction, and it's been my life and passion to be involved with helping people to understand the disease process of addiction and to help people recover. I definitely, I'm just going to say that all those little candies would have done me in. Okay. Just, I got sober when I was 26 years old, and my time took off when I was in my teens, and all the things that Kathy was saying, like the peer pressure, that's what happened to me. And there's Raheem is with us tonight, and he has the ability to share his story with you. So I'll let him tell you more of the details, but I can totally relate to all of the indicators, that so this day and age, it is of the utmost importance that we stay mindful in understanding what substances are out there. I heard recently from a neuropsychologist, that a cognitive behavioralist, her name is Susan Pierce Thompson, and she says that 1/3 of the population is predisposed to addiction. 1/3 of the population in the United States, 1/3 can possibly create an addictive pattern. And then there's another third that necessarily isn't and doesn't have any of the factors that create the addictive personality within the brain. And I think that this day and age, we've all been affected somehow, some way. And we are just constantly, like Kathy said, being bombarded with messaging. And what I know about addiction, alcoholism and addiction is a disease process. There's no doubt about it. And as a disease process, it's one that affects us on a mental level. It is a brain disease. It's a mental health issue. And so it's basically a disease of attitudes. It's one of denial, and it's one of isolation. So I believe through our organization, Alumni in Recovery, that we can find a way on a local level for local people. That's why it's called Alumni. If there's people actually from the area, like Raheem's from Westwood, he'll tell you. But local people gathering together, people that have experienced addiction, that can share their stories from their hearts, as well as people that have lost their loved ones to addiction-related deaths, grieving parents, especially due to the opioid epidemic, the number of people that have lost their children to overdoses, and to give people a voice to be able to talk openly. As a woman in recovery, I know for a fact that has kept me grounded, clean and sober, and to have a community to be able to share and converse with on a regular basis. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be in recovery, but I do think that we all need to be able to get into community action through community events like the one that Ms. Williams is putting on tonight. But if we could have opportunities, which we create through Alumni in Recovery, and the Garfield Coalition creates them, but we must continue to find ways to come together, talk about this openly, be mindful about the different substances out there and why we're putting them into our bodies, and be of service and be able to listen to each other and with compassion, kindness, and create these avenues of knowledge. So I am turning this over to Mr. Raheem Jackson, and thank you very much. Oh, one thing I just want to tell you, Raheem's, we create videos. They're really well done. And I'm going to put Raheem's video of his story in the chat. If anybody wants to just hold on to it, copy it, and share it with their friends that may have missed this, you know, it's a very, you know, it's very helpful for people to hear stories from others. So I'm going to share that with you. And I'll also share a link to a walk that we're offering in Westwood. It's called A Walk to Remember Addiction Awareness and Recovery. And it's on April 24th in Westwood, New Jersey at Westvale Park. It's actually, it's going to be a great event. It's going to be extremely educational. It's not just a regular walk. There'll be displays all along the path to be able to look at that will explain certain things. And it'll be really good for people of all ages, as well as some very good speakers. So I'll put that information in the chat as well. And thank you so much for listening to me. I'll turn it over to Raheem.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, Kathy, as well. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Thank you guys for having me here. Kathy, it's funny to me because as you were sharing and showing the different products and showing everything, I'm sitting down just like, yeah, no, yeah. All this stuff is very easy to get. I identified way more than I really thought I would. It was I feel like sometimes now it's a lot more easy to get and a lot more available to the younger crowd and the younger people in our lives, unfortunately. I also currently work in a school. I'm a support counselor and I'm also a safety officer. So I wear a couple of different hats and I come in contact with that stuff all the time, right? All the time. From middle school, sometimes even elementary school, all the way up to high school. And everything that you said is 100% on point. You know, how easily it becomes. And now with the legalization of marijuana and things like that, where a lot of the younger people think that this is okay now. They just think it's okay, it's legalized, so I can do this. And not understanding the repercussions of what they're really getting into. Sometimes not even knowing at all what they're getting into. The spice, the K2 is a hugely popular thing because like I said, you can buy that anywhere, unfortunately. Next time, I challenge you parents, next time if you're at a gas station, just look at the counter, look behind the counter and just pay attention to what's back there because it's that simple. But you know, my story, I grew up in Westwood, right? In Bergen County. I'm from the area. Nobody in my family is an alcoholic or an addict. Nobody that I know of, in my immediate family at least. And I'm the only one. I like to call myself the black sheep. You know, I was struck with the blessing and the curse of becoming an addict. But I drank. My first drink was 12 years old, and I solely drank because of my insecurities. I did not like who I was. I was not comfortable in my own skin. I just didn't feel okay. On the outside, though, it was one of those things where I was a pretty popular kid. I had friends. I have a younger brother. We're only about a year apart. So, you know, I had friends. I was in things. I was a Boy Scout. I played football. You name it, we did it. My mom's a pastor. My dad's a deacon. So, you know, we didn't even have alcohol in the house. So I didn't grow up in that environment in Westwood. So I say those things because, again, I believe there's a stigma around what an addict is or what they look like, where they come from, the type of households they have to grow up in, and all those other things. And I'm sitting here as proof that that's not what it is. Like I said, my parents didn't even have alcohol in the house. So, you know, I figured it out. I found it. That was my escape. You know, I wasn't peer pressured into it. It was something I just said, hey, let's just see what happens. And that first drink for me at 12 years old, it was my magic elixir. It was my answer to everything. You know, all my insecurities seemed like they went away. It seemed like it was just exactly what I needed at the time. And for me, again, alcohol was my first go-to. And I also like to point that out because, again, there's always this misconception of certain drugs being a gateway drug. And for me personally, I don't believe in a gateway drug because it could be anything. I know people who have picked up heroin for the first time, and that was their gateway drug. They started out with heroin. Some start out with pills, some start out with marijuana, some, like myself, I started out with alcohol. And that for me graduated to other things. And again, Kathy, you hit on some key points, you know, the groups of friends and people that we surround ourselves with. You know, for the most part, like I said, in high school, for me, on the outside, again, you wouldn't have, I guess, thought that I was going through those things. I was an AB student. I didn't really get into too much trouble. Played football my entire life, all the way even through college. And I was captain of the football team in high school as a freshman. I ran varsity track. I was captain of the track team, winter and spring. So I was one of the only kids in Westwood High School that was a triathlete. So you wouldn't have thought these things, but that was my go-to. But my circle, you know, I call myself a chameleon, right? So when I was with my track people, I was a track star. When it was football season, I was the jock. You know, when I had the chance where there was no sports going on, my circle usually changed, and it also got worse as I got older. The more prevalent my addiction became, the smaller my circle got. You know, and the more people I started to either distance myself from or surrounding myself with people who were doing more things like me, right? Because that was comfortable. If anybody brought up how much I drank or how much I was smoking or anything like that, I would pretty much try to distance myself from them because I didn't want to hear it, right? My parents did notice things at an early age, but you know, if you have teenagers or even preteens, you know what that can be like. You know, I have 3 daughters right now, and my 2-year-old sometimes will dismiss me. So I get it. But you know, I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear what my parents had to say. I didn't think they understood me. I didn't think they knew what it was like to feel the feelings I was feeling. They didn't understand what I was going through. So I didn't talk to my parents. I didn't talk to anybody. I just tried to handle it on my own. I tried to just push through and think that I was going to be okay. And what I was doing, like it's been said, I thought it was normal. I graduated high school, and then I went to college on a football scholarship. And that's where things for me, you know, continue to progress. You know, and that's another thing I want to touch on real quick. Everybody's progression can be different. Mine, honestly, was pretty fast. Like I said, I started at 12. By the time I was 16, 17, I was drinking every single day. And you would say, how does a 16-year-old drink every single day? I found ways. You know, I would save my lunch money, and I hung out with older kids. So like I would go there, or I would go to the parents' house that, you know, again, Kathy touched on it, you know, where they weren't really as tight about their liquor cabinet or their liquor closet. So we would just go there and drink the vodka, fill it up with water, and all those things. Or the parents that I always loved, right? Kids love these parents, the ones that allow the partying to happen. You know, we loved those parents the most because we had nothing to worry about. We knew they were going to provide it for us. So those were the things I did, and that's how we figured it out. And even for me, I would travel out of state. I would go to New York, where things were a little bit easier, you know, a little bit more lax. And growing up in Bergen County, we know that's not hard to do. So, you know, for me, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a lot of depression, anxiety. You know, I didn't know what that really was. I didn't know what I was dealing with. I just know that at that time, the alcohol would quiet some of those thoughts down, and it would help ease any of the uncomfortable feelings I was going through. Eventually got to a point where even my family, you know, they didn't really know what to do with me, but they just kind of tried their best, to be honest. Because like I said, I'm the only addict in my family. So nobody really knew what to do at that point. I don't think they really talked about it with anybody else. And I don't think there was any other real outlets for them, or they didn't know where to get the help. For me, I was a blackout drinker as well. My first serious consequence, I recognize it as my first, When I was 20, I was drinking and driving in a blackout. I drove from Westwood, New Jersey to Stamford, Connecticut. And I had no idea how I ended up there. Before that night, I had never been to Connecticut. I had never been to Stamford. Like, I just don't even know why I went there. I don't know how I ended up there. I ended up getting pulled over. I got arrested, spent a couple of nights in jail, came out, and a couple weekends later, it was my 21st birthday. I was drinking like normal, and I was just enjoying myself. I was having so-called quote unquote fun. I ended up having a seizure while I was drinking, and I passed out in my friend's car. At this point, we were still in front of my house. We never even got to leave yet. And my friends didn't know what to do with me. So they left me on my front steps. They got scared. They left me on my front steps. Luckily, my parents were home. My brother came out. He found me passed out on my front steps. And they just thought it was another, they didn't know that I had a seizure. I bring this up also because if you're not familiar with this, please tell this to your children, your friends. There is a law called the Good Samaritan Law. If there's a party, if they're in any situation, anything that's going on, and somebody is potentially overdosing or has alcohol poisoning or anything along those lines where something happens and somebody could potentially be seriously injured or possibly die, the children or whoever's at that party can call the police. They call 911. They will send somebody there as long as they are strictly there to help that person that is in trouble, medical trouble, right? Because what always ends up happening, unfortunately, is that children get scared, they do nothing, and somebody passes away or gets seriously injured. So if you don't remember anything from my talk, please just remember the Good Samaritan Law, and that when the police are called for a situation like that, there are no legal consequences. They are solely there to help the person that needs the medical attention. They take that person. To the best of my knowledge, they might take some of the substances that are around just so they know what they're dealing with. And then they bring that person to the hospital, and that is it. So just please make sure you are aware of that and pass that along. But so after my 21st birthday, I had a seizure. I ended up at the hospital, and I was in a coma for a week. I ended up in a coma for a week just from alcohol. They pumped my stomach. They did all these things. I was on a breathing machine, and it was crazy. They were telling my parents to make funeral arrangements, and that I wasn't going to make it. And by God's grace, here I am, because I know way too many people who have passed away from addiction, from far less things. So I call it nothing short of a blessing and a miracle that I'm here. After that, my parents, my mom is from Mississippi, down south. She didn't really know like what else to do, so I ended up going to live with my aunt and my uncle, thinking that maybe there could be a geographical change and maybe these will spark something in me and be better. I got down to Mississippi, and I'll tell you, it was literally, it was the same thing all over again, right? You can't run from alcohol. You can't run from drugs. It's everywhere, right? You can't say you're going to live with your aunt, your uncle, your whoever, and think that that is going to be a solution. It does not work that way, right? We will find it. As an addict will find what they're looking for. They're going to find what they want, no matter where they are. So there's no such thing as a geographical cure. There's no such thing as loving your loved one sober. You can't do it. So while in Mississippi, I really thought I could change my life, but I didn't. It was the same thing all over again. At one point, I even joined the Army through a blackout drunk as well. I joined the Army. I was in the United States Army for 8 years. And part of my I think one of the lowest points in my life was we were getting ready for our first deployment, and we were doing an IED training, which is improvised explosive devices. And I was a driver in the military at that point before I switched over to another job. And we were working on bombs and all these things. And I was so depressed, and I didn't realize it, how depressed I was and where where I was. That my thinking became at 21 years old, because of my drinking and my drug use, was that the only way out of this was to die and to kill myself. I used to pray that when I went overseas, that I would die over there, because that was the only way to end the pain that I was feeling. That was my solution at 21 years old. I became suicidal. I remember coming back home one day, and I was drinking. I ended up at the George Washington Bridge, and I told myself I was going to jump. The only thing that saved my life that night is the simple fact that I'm terrified of heights. I never realized how high up the bridge was until I was on it. And I was like, no, this ain't happening. I'm happy that I can laugh about that now. But I did attempt suicide several more times. And I know for some people, you're probably like, why is this guy laughing? But I tried taking pills and drinking till this, I'm 36 now, right? Till this day, I have trouble swallowing pills. So that wasn't working for me. I was just throwing everything up. It just wasn't working for me. And then I guess in an odd way, it kind of made me even more depressed, because I was suicidal and I didn't know how to accomplish that. One day I even took a gun, and I tried to pull the trigger, and the gun jammed. So yeah. So at this point, I didn't know what else to do, right? I had friends that were dying. I had friends that had been to rehabs, and I was so ignorant to the recovery world that I thought only drug addicts could go. I was like, I don't have a drug problem. I have an alcohol problem, but I'm okay with it. I almost accepted it as part of my life. But eventually I got to a point where enough was enough, and I checked myself into rehab. I went into Bergen Regional in Paramus, and it was the greatest thing that could ever happen. November 1st, 2010. So I've been sober for 11 years, 5 months ish now. Yeah. So it's been a blessing. Not every day is easy. Not every day is perfect, but that's why I do this. That's why I speak, because when I go to these schools, I know what these children are going through, and I know what some of these parents are going through. I myself now am a parent. These are things that I never thought would be possible for me. I have 3 beautiful daughters, 11, 4, and 2. I'm getting married next month. I have a lot to live for today. I have a lot that I can accomplish now and have accomplished, and I'm happy. I'm happy in my own skin. I'm proud of who I am. I have a lot that like I said, I never thought was possible. But it took me asking for help, and it took me wanting that help. And one of the things that comes up a lot now, especially now that I can have these conversations with my mother and my father, is, what do you do as a parent? How do you help your child? What do you look for? And I wish there was like one simple answer. There really isn't. But the truth is, you have to have these uncomfortable conversations, right? These uncomfortable conversations, whether it's about sex, drugs, friends, all those things. And I say it this way because I don't see any other way to say it, but you have to be a parent. You have to know what's going on in your child's life. You have to be aware of these things. If you're seeing the constant change in friends, if you're seeing the constant change in their behaviors, their attitudes, their grades, all these things can be red flags. And we need to be aware of that. social media even, all of those things play a role into how they end up on this path. And if we're not aware, how can we know what to look for? So that's why I really appreciate Kathy's presentation, because half these things I'm pretty sure, like, the other day I caught a kid in school with one of the marijuana vaporizers, and the principal was like, I never even knew this was a thing. Right? I only noticed it because of the oil. I was like, nope, that's not a vape, that's an oil. So that's weed. And she was like, how do you know? So like, even some school administrators, I hate to say it, they're not even aware. So become familiar with these things. Just be aware of what's happening in your child's world. Be aware what's happening in your world. If you drink, I'm not saying you got to hide the alcohol and keep it under lock and key and don't let them see it or see these things, but have those healthy conversations, have those conversations about, no, you don't touch this, you don't go near this, or if they have to use medication, monitor that, make sure they're taking it the right way. All those things play a role. Right. So that answer, if it answers anything for anybody, is exactly that. We have to be aware, be vigilant, and be proactive in what we're doing in our child's life. And sometimes even in our own lives. Otherwise, if we're not aware of what's going on with us or how we're acting or where we're at, our children are watching everything. I only know that from my own experience with my little ones. So I hope I brought a good message, and thank you.
Thank you.
You muted, Adrienne.
Can everybody hear me or no?
Yeah, yes.
Or Nancy saying something?
Yes, I hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
All right.
Thank you so much, Raheem. What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. Very informative and very realistic, because that's exactly what's happening with our teenagers today. It's the same thing. It's the accessible, right? Everything is accessible to our youth today. So that's why I wanted to, have an open discussion with our parents, teach them how to open that door and not be afraid for when they hear their kids coming home or someone is calling them from the school saying, we found a vape on your kid, and the panic starts, so let's have the conversation before, and be aware and check our kids and monitor. I love that point, Raheem, when you said monitor and be aware, because that's the key point. Because if we are aware and we monitor, we can catch a lot of stuff in the beginning. So thank you again, Raheem. And of course, Nancy, for your story. I didn't even know your story, Nancy. That's the first time I heard your story. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, everyone, for sharing their personal story. Kathy, for the informative presentations and the research with the new stuff that we always have to stay current, even with our policies and the transition, that is going to take place in the next couple of months with all these new mandates and who can sell, who can't sell. So I was even following it on the news today, what's the status of Jersey right now. So as long as we stay aware, we continue to do the work and be proactive and inform, we can make an impact, So again, I thank you for everything tonight. So I'm going to open it up. If there are anyone who would like to ask questions, we have a little bit of time for some questions. If not, then we can close the meeting. I'm not sure. Let me see if I can see hands. We still have people on. So if anyone would like to, I guess, come off and come off of mute, I'm assuming, Mrs. Cooper, that people can ask questions if they come off mute or make a question in the chat or something.
Yes, if anyone wants to ask a question, they can raise their hand and I can promote. I don't see any hands raised, Ms. Williams.
Okay. All right,
Definitely a
then.
lot of information.
Okay, very informative. All right, well, again, I would like to thank all the participants. Sorry about the confusion with the link, but we made it happen as always. So I want to say thank you. And remember, April 1st is Alcohol Awareness Month, and we will be doing activities in the high school. And, you know, and also we're going to bring Kathy and Nancy will be coming back to the high school to work with our freshmen with the Bergen County Narcotic Task Force, because they always have to have a presentation. Kathy, she will be doing our Hidden in Plain Sight. And we're going to connect with our PTSO as we always do every year, you know, to bring the bedroom into the new media, into our media center. So we'll be able to, last year we was on, it was a virtual meeting with Hidden in Plain Sight. Now we can bring the bedroom into back into our media center. That's where we usually had our workshop. So again, I want to thank everyone for the presentation. The comments have been powerful, you know, and they want to thank everyone for the information that was shared tonight. Also, well, if anyone has questions, please feel free to contact me, THS Nurses Office at any time. Oh, okay, that was Kathy Dyker. Yes, our nurse from the high school is on. So is the director. So is Mrs. Mack from the high school. So we are all here because we all are making a difference with our students, and we want to be proactive and preventive. Okay, my dog is barking. So at this time, again, thank
And just so you know, it will be
Mrs.
recorded.
Cooper,
It's being
you wanna say
recorded.
something?
Yes, this is being recorded, and I will crop it and put it on our YouTube. So I'll probably do two parts, one with the information and then one definitely with the story. So thank you for everyone.
Yes.
Good night, Nancy. Thank you, Raheem. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Nancy, see you
Thank
soon.
you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Adrian.
Have a good
Bye
one.
now.